This is Nitin Ramachandra from the NR Hour Sports Show. This is episode 719. I'm joined by Blaine from the Final Whistle Show as a co-host, and then Global Kid Media, Vedant as a co-host and other co-hosts. And we're joined by a special guest, Matt Schaub. He former NFL quarterback. He announced his retirement like 4 days ago, I think, and he's enjoying his time with the family now. And obviously, we're going to get to his career and his afterlife and what he's going to do now. But first, how are you and your family doing so far during this tough situation?
Yeah, we're doing good. Obviously, just making the most of what we're dealt right now as a society and as a family. But fortunately for us, our kids have been in school all school year, so at least going back to last spring, at least things have returned to somewhat normalcy for them as far as school and some of their out of school activities here in Georgia. So it's kind of opened back up for them. But since football's ended, it's just been good to just get into dad mode and just be a little more present. I mean, it's no different though this time of year than if I was still playing, because January, if you're not in the playoffs, February, March, it's kind of downtime and it's the ability to reconnect and get back into, parent mode a little bit.
Yeah. So before we get to the questions, I just want to say congrats on a great career and congrats on your retirement. Obviously you guys had like a party for you. They held a party for you. We're going to get to all that. But first, I want to get to your career. And while growing up, when did you start realizing that you wanted to get into sports, playing sports, and what made you choose football?
Yeah, it was pretty early on. My dad played 3 sports growing up. And so from the time I could really walk, I think I either had a baseball or a basketball or a bat in my hand. And so as soon as I was able to get in some of the youth programs growing up, I was playing t-ball and basketball. And, football for me started in 3rd grade. And when I grew up outside Philadelphia, just because you had to be a certain height, weight, all that stuff and age. So, but up until that point, I mean, through high school, I played 3 sports. So I knew that, that was kind of my thing a little bit, was sports and, school, obviously. But I knew football for me was really kind of 3rd in line for a while. Basketball was my passion. I love baseball, but it wasn't until high school when I realized, I've kind of have this quarterback thing, dialed in a little bit. And then I knew my junior year that was probably going to be my path to college.
I always like to ask this. If it wasn't football, say your arm didn't work the way it does, what would you be doing?
It's a tough question to answer. I think if football didn't work out, to where I got to college with it, hopefully one of the other sports might have gotten me into college to some extent. Now, would that have transpired into a professional career? I doubt it. But hopefully through that school, I would have found a niche somewhere along the lines. I was an economics major, and perhaps maybe I would have followed the business school a little bit closer or gone into graduate school and been in the business world somewhere. Tough to say at this point, but I doubt, I would have been able to go to the University of Virginia had it not been for football.
Picking up on you transitioning to the University of Virginia, you registered that first season. What did you want to learn and try and gain and improve on before you took that next step going into your 2nd year? Yeah,
I mean, it was a huge year of growth for me as a quarterback, because growing up in Pennsylvania, especially in the mid-late 90s, we were a wing T offense. And, for anyone listening that doesn't know football, if we were lucky, especially my sophomore year, we were lucky to throw it 7-8 times a game. It's a all run, option, downhill run game, and just run like 6 plays. It's like the movie Remember the Titans. It's like we had 6 plays and we were just going to run them until, if they didn't work, and we wouldn't be able to move the ball. But then I, taught my coach at the time, some new tricks from some of the camps I went to and say, hey, let's throw the ball a little bit more. And, then my senior year, we still only threw like 15 times. But when you go to college and you start seeing some of the defenses and you start seeing, really like real football, offensive schemes and, combinations and what you're trying to do to manipulate defenders, man, and the speed of the game. I mean, it was so much faster. I think, and I often tell people this, I really thought the speed of the game, that jump from high school to college is so much bigger than when you go from college to the NFL. Right. I think that that gap is just massive. So that first year for me, redshirting was huge because I got to just learn and develop and, become more mature, lifting weights and just get used to school. A lot of guys, I don't know how freshmen just run onto campus and start. It baffles me sometimes. I know a lot of high schools run these pass first offenses and it kind of translates a little bit easier. But for me, it was a huge learning curve that first year of college.
So I got to ask you about your draft experience. Obviously, you got drafted in 2004, pick 3, round 90 with the Falcons. And what was that like, draft experience and getting the call from the Falcons? Obviously, you played with Michael Vick that year too. But this, take me back to the call first, your draft experience call.
Yeah, so back then the draft wasn't this big, TV thing that it was, but it wasn't. It was 2 days. It was Saturday, there was 3 rounds. Mm-hmm. Sunday was the last 4 rounds, still just 7 rounds. There wasn't the Thursday night, Friday night, all day Saturday. It was just real quick and real tight. So for me, my draft class, I was with Eli Manning, Ben Roethlisberger, Phillip Rivers. And I knew I was somewhere in that mix just behind those guys with another guy by the name of JP Losman. He played at Tulane, I believe. And so I knew where I was in the line, in the pecking order, I guess you could say. Did I know Atlanta was going to be drafting a quarterback? Not at all. But I thought, teams like Cleveland were, Green Bay was interested. Obviously, Green Bay went on the next year to draft Aaron Rodgers. Right. But I thought those teams were interested. So once those other 4 guys came off the board in the first round, I knew, okay, the next team that wants a quarterback, I'm probably the guy, right? And I had all my family, friends there in Charlottesville at the University of Virginia. We played golf, had a cool experience, nice day, everyone back to the apartment. So we're just waiting. And then, picks come. And then the 3rd round comes and I see this number. My parents, since I left high school, moved to Atlanta. Mm-hmm. So I knew some of the town, I knew the area codes, if you will, and my phone rings. And it's, I think it was a 404 number. There's a couple area codes here, but I was like, that's Atlanta. So I went into my room in my apartment, answered, and it was Rich McKay, the GM at the time, and said, we're going to pick you with the next pick. I'm like, this is awesome. I had no idea you guys were going to draft a quarterback because Mike Vick was coming back from his injury. Right. He was injured the year before with his leg injury, and Jim Moore Jr. was the new head coach. And so I didn't really know much about their style of offense or what they were doing, but I was like, holy smokes, I couldn't be more different than Michael Vick. If he gets hurt, our offense is going to be wildly different than when he's in there. So, but the thing for me that was great was I was like, okay, he's coming off an injury. The preseason, I'm going to play a ton. Mm-hmm. I'm going to get a lot of action in there to develop and learn and grow. And the style offense was very similar to what I did at Virginia. Right. And along the way, in the first 3 years I was with the team, Mike gets dinged up a lot. So I got a lot of time to play and get in there and show what I could do. Cause you're auditioning for all the other teams. Right. And so for me, that was a credible opportunity to show what I could do.
Before we speed past Virginia, I want to know if you're a big basketball fan of the school, and tough one last couple of days ago. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, well, man, it was a tough week for him. That was hard. Ohio was really good. Watching that game, they're a talented basketball team, and that's what's great about the NCAA tournament is teams you really don't know about because of the conference they're in or their lack of TV exposure. You don't know how good they are. I mean, look at some of the upsets. Some of these teams are solid basketball teams, and Virginia having to leave the ACC tournament, before their semifinal game against Georgia Tech the Friday before, then having to go back to school and just quarantine and not be able to practice until the day before the game. I mean, that's a tough hand to be dealt, albeit you would like to be able to go out and play well and win. And they played reasonably well, but they just weren't themselves. And I feel like that was when you can't practice as a team for a whole week and then you kind of go out and play. That's tough. I mean, their last 4 years, you look going back when they were the number 1 overall seed and they lost the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, got smoked in the first round. That was tough because that's never happened. And then come back. It's like a Disney movie. Then you come back and the next year they win the national championship. I mean, and then COVID happens and then they get back and they lose to, what was it, a 4-13 game. So it was a tough loss. They'll rebound. Tony Bennett's done a great job with that program and he kind of has them. They're dialed in as far as what they want to be.
Yeah. I remember being there at their championship in 2019 at the Final Four. I was gonna say, man, they just needed you to re-enroll, and maybe they would have won that game.
You know what? That team in 19, with Kyle Guy, DeAndre Hunter, they had some studs. They could play. They had a complete game. They had the guys that could shoot three, that could penetrate, they get to the hole, and they always play good defense. But I think they're just still another player or two away from being right back there.
But all I can say is the new Cinderella story this year is Oral Roberts, I think.
You're not kidding. They're good. They're a good basketball team. And some of the teams today are going to be, Ohio's got a tough matchup, but they could be good. Abilene Christian knocking off Texas the other day. I mean, holy cow.
Yeah.
It helps for Ohio that Jason Preston's an absolute superstar that's going to play at the next level. Almost having a triple. Yeah, he almost had a triple-double, I think, against you guys. He was 2 assists short.
He did. He's a stud. He's a good player. You just wonder how long that kind of one-man show can sustain, because you're going to find teams and defenses that can, have a matchup problem for you. So we'll see what happens. It's a crazy time of year. And as you know, I mean, anything can happen. The shots start falling. I mean, anything can go.
For sure. And transitioning back to your time in Atlanta, what was the mentality for you when you heard from the GM that you're going to Houston, and it sounds like you're going to be the guy for the Houston Texans? What was going through your head there?
Yeah, incredible opportunity, actually, and I was a part of that process. It was about early March, right before free agency. And, I was a restricted free agent. So knowing that scenario, some team could come in and trade for me, and, it could happen or whatever. But then I heard, I was out in California at a golf tournament and got a call from my agent saying, the Texans are interested in trading for you, but they want Gary Kubiak, the head coach, to come out and visit with you and hang out, play around in golf, and just get to know one another and make sure that this is the right fit. And you're both comfortable with one another. And obviously he's a former quarterback and offensive coordinator, offensive minded guy. So we wanted to see if we see things through the same lens. And so he came out, we had spent a day together. And I mean, within the first hour, I texted my agent, and he told me later on that he messaged, Bob McNair at the time, the owner, the late Bob McNair, that, we're going to make this happen. We both were on the same page. And, so at that point, then it was up to the team and my agent to, and actually Atlanta and Houston to negotiate what's going to happen in the terms of the deal. But for me, I was just so excited that, the hard work was paying off to where I was going to get an opportunity to be the quarterback of a franchise and be the leader of a team. And, have that chance to, step in the huddle as the guy. And, my time there was awesome. And so I was super excited because it was a young franchise that, through the first 5 years at that time had not, had even gone 8-8. They hadn't, they've been a losing team every year. And so wanting to be a part of that change, wanting to bring that city who is starving for a winner, just that. And, we got that done. And so it was really rewarding to know that, that was a good decision.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just curious. I just have to ask, I always ask these players, whoever changes multiple teams, but for you, obviously you got drafted by the Falcons, and then the Texans gave you more opportunities to play in your career. But how tough was it as a player moving to a different team like the Raiders and the Ravens too in between? Yeah. How tough was it leaving?
It was very tough because of the life changes that went on outside of the locker room. When I first got traded to Houston, my now wife, we were just dating at the time. So it was a lot easier for me to, I knew I was going to propose to her and we were going to get married and all that, but it was easier to just go and move when it was just us. But then, when we're in Houston, we had 3 kids, and my wife was pregnant with our 4th when, I got traded after the 2013 season to go to Oakland. So we moved there and rented a house and sold our place in Houston, all while she was pregnant. And she ended up having our 4th child in California, in the Bay Area. And then going to Baltimore, with 4 kids and 2 dogs. I mean, that's, finding another rental home, that's tough. I mean, trying to find schools, trying to find, doctors for the kids. There's just so many intangibles that have nothing to do with football, but impact your life and your mind space so much that for me, I just wasn't done yet. And I wanted to still, chase my dream. And that was to, win a championship and, be an NFL quarterback. So incredibly supportive wife, and family that, would help us. And both of our parents were huge helps through all that process. But that's what made each transition so much harder. And then fortunately, after the Baltimore, things got a little easier because I met my wife in Atlanta. We knew we wanted to settle in the Southeast. She's from Alabama. And Atlanta comes calling, and Kyle Shanahan, who's the offensive coordinator at the time before the 16 season, I was with in Houston. And we've been trying to match back up all these years. And so to come back here to an organization I know, and settle down where we want to live for the rest of, hopefully, our lives, who knows what life brings us, and still continue to play football, man, it was just a match made in heaven. So we're fortunate that it ended. All those little moves ended in a positive note to be here.
I want to go back to your time in Houston and talk about working with Sage Rosenfels, who I've had on my show, and talked a lot about some of the great stories. Talk about your interactions with him and all the different people you're either backing up or were backing up you. And that QB room at every different spot.
Yeah, the QB room is a sacred place. I mean, I always called it whenever I was in, no matter what role I was in, it's the nest. It's that nest where you can say anything, because you got to be able to talk about, teammates. You got to be able to talk about personnel and freely, and it doesn't leave the room. No one's going to take anything and go and say what's being said in there. But you got to be on the same page. You got to be able to work together and be able to interact and have no rifts or animosity or anything like that, because there's a lot of long hours watching film, game planning, and thoughts going on what you're going to do versus certain blitzes or certain coverages. And going from my time in Atlanta, learning behind Mike Vick and our coaches here of how things can be done one way, and developing my own plan for when I get an opportunity, and going to Houston, and Sage was there. He was a couple years older than me, so a veteran presence to kind of help, that transition for me. And, he was a good resource to have for the first 2 years there until, he moved on to the next phase. And so, he was good to have in the room, and same thing with every other guy I've been around, just that relationship, that rapport that you got to have with one another is, pretty sacred. It's a tight knit group. It's a fraternity. And so, you got to be able to see things similarly.
I want to focus on the 2009 season, where you led the league in passing yards, completions, yards per completion. You led the Texans to their first ever winning season. You were also a Pro Bowl MVP that year. Just describe what you were able to accomplish with the Texans in that season, being able to be the one that was first to say, hey, I was the first Houston Texans quarterback to lead the team to a winning record in organization history.
Yeah, I mean, it was a special year because the first couple of years, I had a knee injury, I had a shoulder injury that prevented me from finishing all 16 games. So to get through that year and stay healthy relatively and be able to play through that, and our team did as well. And we had a great group of guys. When you have a guy like Andre Johnson, Kevin Walter on the other side, Jacoby Jones was a young receiver. You have Owen Daniels at tight end. Or, at that time, and our offensive line was coming together. Dwayne Brown was a young player, Chris Myers, Eric Winston on the other tackle. We had a good offensive group. And, teams had a hard time figuring out what we were doing with a lot of our play action and our bootleg game and things like that, that Kubiak designed. And, our run game wasn't the best, but it was efficient enough. Steve Slayton was our running back, and he really had come into his own, was a good pass catcher out of the backfield. So we had a lot of weapons to distribute the ball to. And so just to try to do my job and, trying to keep it simple, throw to the open receiver, right? And just go through your read and just, let your progression, and as we call it in the quarterback world, reading with my feet and just doing what I was coached to do. That's how those things happen. And, but when you can't do it unless you have the guys around you to make that happen. And fortunately, we did. And we had some success. We could have probably won a couple more games, but, 9-7 is not horrible. We missed out on the playoffs by, that last game, that Sunday night of week 17, when I think it was the Bengals and the Jets played, and we needed the Jets to win, or I'm sorry, we needed Cincinnati to win, and we would have got in, and the Jets played all their backups and Cincinnati rolled. So we didn't get in the playoffs. So we had a chance, but we didn't.
So speaking of before I get to my questions, speaking of Jacoby Jones, I had him on the show last year, and he was fun to talk to. And what was that? What was it like having a guy that with that type of speed, along with obviously you said Andre Johnson, Owen Daniels, but to have that guy who
Yeah.
can give you extra yards, what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, Jacoby, he's a trip. He's a character. He was fun to be around. I mean, for him coming in, at a Lane College, small school, but as explosive as a return man, what he could do in the pass game for us, because we didn't really have a guy that could fill in if Andre missed any time or needed a break. And we needed that guy. We needed another guy that could play in the slot and do some of the things that we had done at that position. And Jacoby came in to be that guy. And obviously there's this, I don't think a lot of people realize how much of a learning curve there is for wide receivers coming in the NFL.
Right.
A lot of people just think, oh, you run fast, catch the ball, period. That's it. Well, it's not that simple. Getting off of press coverage in the NFL is wildly different than in college. Being able to recognize rotations of safeties and how routes adjust for 7 different coverages. You need to know those things, as soon as they happen on the snap of the football. And Jacoby, it obviously was a steep learning curve to start, but he really developed into form and, turned in a really good player for us. Wish we could have used him more and, not let him go to Baltimore. And then he won the Super Bowl with Baltimore. But man, he was such a talented guy. And, I wish we could have been able to connect. But I mean, Andre caught so many balls that it was hard to spread it around like we probably wanted to. But Jacoby is a talented human being. And man, he was fun to have on our roster and in the locker room because he's hysterical.
Yeah, so I got real quick. I got to ask you a follow-up question just about the Falcons, your last 4 years in Atlanta. But I want to get to the last year in 2020. What was it like just playing with Matt Ryan, and you had Julio Jones, you had Todd Gurley too, and all these other talented players, and Calvin Ridley. So what was it like just spending your last year in Atlanta and spending the last 4 years and the team that drafted you?
Yeah, I mean, to come back here in 16 and go to the Super Bowl with this organization, come so close. I mean, it's well documented what happened in that game, so I'm not going to bring that up. But to come back here, this organization has been so good to me, and Arthur Blank and Rich McKay, to come back here and finish up where I started, and then them to keep me around for 5 years. I mean, that is just an awesome thing to be able to, where I'm living, continue to do what I love to do. But I knew Matt Ryan, since he came in the league. We grew up actually 15 minutes away from one another in Pennsylvania, albeit he's 4 years younger. I did play against his older brother in baseball in school growing up. So, and I played a few rounds of golf with him before we became teammates all these years. And so I knew him and I knew of him and how he used the game. So going back to the QB room thing, that was just a natural transition when I got here, just the way we work and operate and can communicate. I mean, it was just a great relationship in the room. But when you look at the weapons that we've had, I mean, yeah, Julio is an absolute freak on the field. And you bring in Calvin Ridley, who in his 3rd year this past season has shown what he can do to the whole league. I mean, he's a true number 1 wide receiver. When Julio's out, he steps up and just has monster numbers. And having Todd come in as a presence in the backfield was great for us. And just Hayden Hurst coming in, his talent that he can bring and threatening a defense in the middle of the field. I mean, we've always had some good weapons here with the Falcons. And so we just need to kind of put it back together to get back to that 2016 form that, was basically from the December 1 through the Super Bowl, really unstoppable.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of unstoppable, let's take you back to 2012, week 11, playing the Jaguars. You kind of went off, 527 yards, 5 touchdowns. I mean, you're tying a Houston legend in Warren Moon at that point. What do you remember most about that day? And did you even think about the stats during the game? Did you have any idea where you were?
No, and unless some stadiums flash those things up or have a screen that always, unless they do that, you have no idea. I mean, you're just playing the game. You're just doing whatever you can to get the ball in the end zone. And that game was crazy because I believe, we couldn't stop them either. We had a really good defense, but we couldn't stop the Jaguars offense. I believe Blaine Gabbert got hurt. Chad Henne came in and in like three quarters threw for like 400 yards. So, you know, it required us to throw the football, and they've always had a good defensive front. So we had a tough time running the ball with Arian Foster. And so we just had to go to our pass game because their secondary wasn't very strong. And, you know, we went into overtime, which helped the stats a little bit until we had the 50-yard walk-off touchdown by Andre, you know, down the right sideline. So, but yeah, you don't know those things when the game's going on. And so it wasn't until the end when, you know, was going in for my press conference and, you know, they were telling me, you know, our media director saying what the stats were. I was like, I did what? You know, yeah, I would have only guessed probably 320 or something like that. It never seems, because, you know, some of the throws you're just, you know, throwing screens and guys are making a play with it after they get it. So you don't really understand what's happening when you're doing it. But the crazy thing about that game, if I
Did we lose them?
win it overtime and back a full points it was now today, 4 days later, we're playing the 11 o'clock a.m. game against the Detroit Lions, and we go into overtime against them and kick a game-winning field goal with about inside 2 minutes left on the clock in that game. So within 4.5 days, we played almost 10 quarters of football. And I'll tell you what, we deserved that weekend off after that for Thanksgiving.
That's crazy.
Matt, for you, what's been the greatest challenge, or was the greatest challenge for you in the NFL? Was it trying to adapt to the game of speed again, just like how you mentioned in college, trying to prepare differently, learning different offenses? What was it for you?
You know, I'll go, I guess I'll go two different avenues. I mean, yes, you mentioned learning different offenses, and I was fortunate that I was in from my junior year of college, basically my whole career in the same type of system. Subtle changes, but the wording, the protections, formationally, things might have been called a little bit different. I had 1 year in Oakland where things were wildly different. And that was a tough adjustment because your brain is just hardwired for one thing, you know, spit plays out, you know, you have it all memorized and go. This was completely different to me. It was completely foreign. I had to spend so much more time studying just how play calls are called rather than just the offense and just how to operate it. It was like just being able to get in the huddle and spit a play call out, which was second nature forever. That was challenging. And so just have to go to the coach and be like, hey, call that one again in the headset. You know, that was just something that, you know, I hadn't been accustomed to. The other thing that's major difference is how much people care about what actually is taking place or how little they know, but they act like they know, you know, because obviously it's well documented. 2013 was a rough season. And, you know, to be able to, you know, hear that people are stopping in front of the house or just getting out of their cars and yelling at my house in the middle of the day, and I'm at work and I get a call from my wife and my kids can't even go outside to play because, you know, who knows who it is that's yelling, and media news crews sitting in the street just videoing our house. Like, that's just crazy to think like that's what happens, but it does. And you look now at social media when guys, you know, college players, you know, miss a free throw and you get all these things and people just think they can just say things and everything like that. It's just ridiculous that that's where people's mind spaces are at, when it's like, we're all human. We make mistakes and we, you know, we learn from and move on, but like to go a certain distance with it is just crazy.
I want to ask you about your retirement process and what was that like? I know it was tough for you guys as a family too. And I was like, when I saw the news that Matt Schaub retired, I was surprised myself because there's these teams looking for backup quarterback help, and I could have sworn that Matt Schaub, you could have still played as a backup quarterback or start if someone get injured. So take me back to the process. Did you have any teams? I mean, when did you realize that you wanted to retire? And I know you just retired, but if you had a chance, if someone like calls you, would you consider coming back?
Yeah, you know, I had the idea, you know, it's something for the last 2 years I thought about, like, okay, because contract wise, you know, what's going to happen, you know, I knew my year after this year, I was going to be a free agent, but, you know, I just, you know, I was comfortable if it was going to be my last. Going into this year, I was like, you know what, if this is my last, if that's where I get to at the end of the year, I'm good with that. You know, I'm at peace with that decision, albeit it's tough to make that decision in with COVID and no fans, family can't travel to away games or, be able to see a play. They can come to home games, but, I had made peace with that decision. And so when the end of the season came, I was healthy. Yeah, I know I could still play, but there's also something to be said with going out on your own terms and just deciding when you've had enough. And it's been a great journey. And for me, understanding where Atlanta's at, with, Matt's going into year 14, they obviously need to make a decision. And with a new staff, I knew that they'd want to go young behind him. And so for me to go and chase another year with another team when we're comfortable living here as a family, I would not want to be apart from my wife and 5 kids, and to make them move for the football season, man, I've done that to them. It's now, my time to pay it back to them for all that they've sacrificed for me. And, if someone does come calling, we'll see, depends on who it is and what position they are at in the season. I mean, if it's a contender, I'm going to stay in shape. I can still spin it. So if someone comes calling in November and is like 10-1, hey, I'll be there. I'll be on the next flight. But, and going back to it, I mean, there was a couple teams that called right after the season when they heard, that I was going to retire, and they're like, "Are you sure you're done? Are you sure you're done?" And I was like, you know what? It's too soon to say I'm not. I mean, it just happened. And, so we'll see what happens, what the future holds. But right now I'm totally at peace with not putting a helmet on again.
You're saying you're not going to play 8 more seasons, win 8 Super Bowls, and be the greatest quarterback of all time?
You know what? I'm not going to make those reckless comments right now. I might think them, but it might feel like it could happen. But no, I'm not going to make that comment.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about that, though. I mean, you get to nearly 40 years old. You see what Tom Brady's doing. You see what some of these guys are doing. How do you keep up with that? How are you able to stay in shape and play at your best still when most people are well into their retirement?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of your discipline and taking care of yourself, like you said. And, obviously with Tom, he's on top of his nutrition. He has a whole team of people that, help, take care of himself and be able to, the maintenance on his body and his, physical conditioning, and he takes great pride in that. And I think to play as long as he has at the level he has, I mean, that speaks for itself. And that's just everything, off the field. But, obviously he's played when he steps on, he's in control of everything and plays well. And he's always had good players around him. And just, that's no different in Tampa this year with the defense that they've had and the weapons, probably the best he's had in his career at his disposal. I mean, between the run game and what they were able to do in the play action game, I mean, it's a special season for them, but it's remarkable. It's hard to do, even when you back up your last 5 years, like I did, it's hard to get through a whole season, healthy and just feeling good, and to be able to play under center all these years, as a starter and not only have one injury that kept him out of games. I mean, that's it is remarkable.
I'm going to switch some gears here and talk a little bit of something that you're doing outside of football, the GR8 Hope Foundation. I was wondering if you could just talk about that a little bit more, and if you have anything that's coming up that we should be on the lookout for.
Yeah. So you mentioned that. So it's kind of a play on words. So we call it the Great Hope. So the 8 kind of blends in with the GR. So Great Hope. And we started it back in, I think, 2010 in Houston, my wife and I. And it was when we just had our first child. And we knew going into that, before we had her, that we wanted to start a foundation to make a difference. But we didn't know where. And, our first 2 thoughts were education, kids in education, or help out some of the local children's hospitals with things. And once, we had our first child and others were too, and we see that it's not easy and there's a lot of complications, a lot of things that go on. We just knew right then that we wanted to help out kids with medical needs and the local children's hospital in Houston. And so we did, and we had events, we had golf tournaments, we had fun, galas, kind of a weekend deal. And we had different events and had a lot of fun with it, raised a lot of money, built a playroom at one of the hospitals. We, one hospital wanted to expand their emergency room to, from 12 to 24. And so we helped fund the other 12 rooms through the events that we did. And so had a lot of support through Houston, and did a couple things, along the lines. It kind of faded away for a few years with all the moves and transitions, but we've really tried to dig in here in Atlanta with the local Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, and do a lot with their events and try to piggyback and just help out wherever we can to be able to lend a hand. And my wife has really done a great job, supporting their organization as well as Make-A-Wish, and Great Hope is still alive. We just try to join in other organizations and what they're doing and try to help out rather than, really, because people knew about it in Houston and Atlanta. Here, it's still, no one really knows about it. So we just try to help out wherever we can.
Wow, that's really amazing, inspiring.
I apologize for botching the name, by the way.
It's okay. No, you're fine. You didn't know. It's all right. No harm.
Wow, that's amazing what you're doing, and you and your wife, man, just keep up the great work with that. And speaking of foundations, the last two things here before we let you go. So speaking of foundations, our full team that I assembled here for the show, we're part of the Hugh Jackson Foundation. Obviously, you know him, a former NFL coach. He's trying to get back into coaching at some point, and we're ambassadors for the foundation, and we're trying to help him prevent human trafficking, making sure the community is safe, and making sure these kids make the right choices. So I'm going to send you his foundation. You can check it out too, and we're really grateful to be part of it, and they're doing great things with that foundation, and I just want to bring that up. And the last thing here, would you like to say anything to all the nurses, doctors, and essential workers?
Man, hats off. And, just the work that they've done, really have stepped up for the world, for the country, for everybody, just what they've been able to do, and just been the face of taking care of everyone, and just keep trying to keep everyone safe and calm, and doing whatever they can. It's just, I could not imagine doing their jobs in a non-pandemic, but when you throw this on top of it and what they've had to endure and the severity of things, they didn't hesitate. They just put on whatever PPE and things they needed to do to keep everyone safe and healthy and take care of them. And we are all forever indebted to those first responders for what they've done.
Yeah. So before we end, do you guys have anything else to add, Blaine or Vedant?
Man, I wanted to say, if you ever need a kid ambassador with your foundation, I'd be happy to work with you. Like Nathan said, we're working with the Hugh Jackson Foundation, and I'm working on a couple of things with some different people. So I'll talk to you maybe directly offline about some of those things.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I would love to help out in any way as well. And I'm very thankful for you coming on today. It was really humbling.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, so this wraps up episode 719 for the NR Hour Sports Show with former NFL quarterback, recently retired Matt Schaub. Go follow him on all social media formats. This was awesome. If you do decide to come back in the league, please come to the Dallas Cowboys. And I'm a big Cowboys fan, and we need a backup quarterback. And you can help out Dak in a big way. I think you can bring that veteran leadership to Dallas, like what you did throughout your career. And we would love to have you on board in Dallas. And if you do decide to come back, please call Jerry Jones, or Jerry Jones call Matt Schaub.
No, come to Washington. Don't listen to him. Washington, please.
If we're all gonna pitch, come to Detroit.
No, I don't know about any of the teams that you're throwing out there. I'm just kidding. No, hey, we'll see. Who knows? One of them might be sitting in a pretty spot come late November, early December next year. We'll see.
Yeah, but I just want to say thank you again for coming on. This is truly an honor, and you and your family are such inspirations, and I'll definitely check out the foundation, and you and your family stay safe.
Hey, appreciate it. You guys take care. Thanks for having me on.
No problem.
Thank you.